Welcome, everyone, to another podcast, Blue Chips Global Podcast. And I'm Scott Strode, Post Play Media, LLC, and Blue Chips Global. We are presented by Bracket Sports. Bracket Sports presents 13 events in 4 states, including West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. And their 4th state and final event is in lovely Gatlinburg, Tennessee, for their national championships. Today, we have a very special guest, but also a very elusive one that we've been trying to track down for several months. But we finally caught him, and it's Jeff Dolan of Verbal Commits, is probably how maybe most of you know him, but also Court Vision Hoops, who's he is the proprietor of. Jeff, welcome in, and let's just talk about Verbal Commits and Court Vision Hoops, your two main squeezes here as far as the business ventures you're in the basketball world.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me. Obviously it was a couple months of trying to track me down, pretty busy, but so I'll just kind of go into Verbal Commits. So, it's owned by Brandon Goebel, which probably a lot of people know is the JUCO advocate. We do a bunch of different things with them. We run a lot of events. Some of the main ones, obviously the J48 in July with the top 48 to top 60 junior college players in the country that come play on the live period during the Puma circuit. And then we do the J Champions as well over in Bryan, Texas, the weekend after in July. But we also, right now they're crunching to do the transfer portal thing, which is the Recruiter Plus on the Verbal Commits website, where, all the 4-year coaches get a login and can see all the kids that are hitting the portal live. And we have a back end team that puts in all the data, cell phone numbers, all that stuff, so that the coaches that do subscribe to it have that information immediately so they can contact those kids or the agents or whoever it is. And then we obviously do a lot of events in October-ish for the Jamborees for JUCO. I think we did 7 last year. Pittsburgh, Oklahoma City, Atlanta, St. Louis, Colorado, and what was the other one? There's one other one. But, this year I think we'll probably do a little bit less. It was a lot to do that many at once. But, we got some pretty exciting stuff coming up here in the next couple weeks that we'll announce over the Verbal Commits Twitter page and stuff. And then I, decided to kind of go out on my own just a little bit, where I created a JUCO database for the women's and men's side that has, all the contact information, stat pages, offers and things like that. Just kind of shared as a Google sheet. But, right now we have over 1,600 on the men's side. And then about 300 or 400 on the women's side. So it's been really good. We've had a bunch of people, subscribe to it and use it, and, kind of just giving the information to the coaches so they can contact those players and look for those JUCO kids. And then we did a prep post-grad database as well. That one's a little bit tougher because we've done a lot of work on developing the relationships with the junior college coaches over the last, I think I've been with Brandon for about 10 years now. So that one's easy. We kind of started getting in the prep post-grad space this past year, and it's gone well, but it's going to take a little time to develop, those relationships with those coaches and things like that. But I think we had over 900 kids from across the country in that one so far.
Oh, that's good.
So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing.
Good deal. Back to the Jamborees. Of course, I had the opportunity to be there at one of those and coach, which I didn't really want to, but I was almost forced into it. But anyway, And I can't thank you enough for, you've been over backwards probably twice for us to make it happen there. But let's talk about, the growing significance of events like that, of JUCO, because every coach, Division II, Division One, will tell you, will tell me, it's portal first, JUCO second. That's almost everybody's pecking order, no matter what. So, do you see? I don't know how long you've been doing those, but have you seen, a lot stronger significance in who's paying attention, who's attending, who's getting your player list? What are you seeing in terms of the activity there and engagement with coaches?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Kind of since the portal, man, like it's it's actually been on somewhat of a decline, surprisingly, as far as like the coaches like attending events and purchasing, scouting services and all that kind of stuff. One, probably because a lot of them need to save that money to pay players, which, I think this year across the board, from what I was hearing, like, events were down anywhere from 20 to 25%, just because like they didn't want to spend the money, you're right, like to go out to those things, which is I don't know what the answer is, or how you kind of correct it, but that's kind of what we saw. So I think right now, I think with the events, like it's doing less with more. Like we added a bunch of events this past year, but noticed that, guys weren't traveling, to come to some of them and whatnot. So like they kind of need to be in like good central locations. That's why like Atlanta and Oklahoma City and even somewhat Denver. And then there's some other ones, with, I think JUCO Recruiting does one down in Orlando. Can't remember who does the one in Kansas City. I think it's somebody involved with what's that, top Mocan. There's another one that kind of started that is kind of growing, but they're all kind of centrally located. When we did the one in Pittsburgh and the one in West Virginia and even St. Louis, it was difficult to get coaches there also, because a lot of these guys are recruiting the big time schools up front, right? Trinity Valley, South Plains, Odessa, Northwest Florida, all those kinds of, teams like that. So when you have an event that doesn't necessarily have those teams in it, it's hard to draw those 4-year, at least Division Ones, right? We really saw like in St. Louis, it was a lot of NAIAs and Division Twos showing up to that one, and even at the Appalachian one, I think we only had one Division One come by, and then Pittsburgh was kind of interesting. We had some issues with some NCAA stuff that nobody was really aware of, so there was some compliance, people saying that they couldn't go, but then some other compliance offices were saying we were clear. So I think we had about, I don't know, there was probably around 100 coaches at that one, from all levels. But as far as the recruiting aspect, I've definitely seen a lot of junior college kids committing earlier, now because of the transfer portal, and not waiting as long, where before it was like they would kind of wait to see what they could all get. Well, now a lot of these junior college kids are committing early, it seems like, so they don't miss when the portal does go, because then it's everybody's just in the portal, right? And then
Right.
you really get a big stretch of commitments after the portal closes, probably around like June and July is when I start seeing a lot of junior college kids off the board, because everybody kind of missed on some portal kids, and then they go back into JUCO to fill those voids. is kind of what we've seen over the course of the last 2 years.
That's good. Yeah, good info for people to know, and I think that's the part that we're really really as much privy to that, and it's hard to understand. It makes this stuff there's so many angles and entry points and exit point where people just they don't really understand all the mystery around all the JUCO stuff and I told oh shoot, the Potomac State head coach who we had on, last week. I said I'm still trying to get it out of people's heads, parents who call me and asking for consulting and advice. That JUCO isn't JV basketball; it's like real basketball, and people get in this head. It's like a step down for some reason, and I'm like, you can't be any more uninformed or misinformed, and it's just so I'm just trying to get that through to people, and then you do step into it, and like you said, the windows of opportunity and the windows of recruiting are can be just so much different because it's a different you just got a different set of circumstances that coaches are working with to bring guys in. So I don't know. It's a weird thing, but I just wish I wish people would take it more serious. I do think we're starting. Daggone, I cannot think of his name, but Coach Brady at Coach Folk at Potomac State, I think is doing a good job of kind of. Not that the coach before didn't do a good job because he obviously did, but I think he's trying to. Maybe make people more aware of what they are, what they do, and winning games and keeping them, especially in state in West Virginia, keeping them kind of familiar with everybody is a big thing, and I think that's what he's doing a really really good job of doing. So, but it's so funny. I mean, to talk to kids about JUCO, and it's just like you just don't get it, you just don't. You're not understanding this at all. But
Yeah, it's funny you say that because, we've had, high school teams that, ask if they can come watch it, especially the Oklahoma City or Atlanta one. I mean, we got some of the top JUCOs and even players in the country in those ones, that are signing at, Big 12 schools or whatever. And they these kids will come and watch, or even if there's prep schools or whatever, and they'll see it and they'll be like, man, that's high level basketball. I mean, you got some grown men out there, and it's very physical. It's fast, and so
very, yeah.
when they come and they look at one of those jamborees, it's eye opening to see how good you really have to be to play at that level.
Yeah,
it's a different style of basketball. It's
it really is.
up and down and physical, and you got some kickbacks from Division Ones, high major programs sometimes, even
Right.
mid major programs, and so it's definitely one of those things. It's only gotten better, over the course of the last 10 years. I think the level of play has gone up in all levels. One thing I'll say about like this transfer portal thing is, I think one thing it's really making stronger is these high school kids and stuff that used to be able to sign at 4 years and stuff are now going to either prep schools or junior colleges and getting bigger, faster, stronger, and then you're adding them back in to those 4-year institutions. I mean, I think the level of play over the last 15 years is just remarkable, at the 4-year level. And I think that's why the gap, back then, if you were a 16 seed playing a 1 seed, you were getting blown out most of the years.
Right.
And now
Right.
that's not happening. I think the gap is really closing on the level of play if you're a high major to even a low major in some aspects, because the
For
players
sure.
are just getting better. And um, personally, I think it's playing into the NCAA's hands. I know everybody is up in arms, but I firmly believe that that's what they want. It's a better product on the floor, for their business. They want bigger, faster, stronger, and that's why the portal, it makes it now. I don't necessarily do like I don't necessarily hate the portal at all. Some people do, some people don't. It just depends
Yeah.
on who you ask. But as far as the level of play, it's making it better, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. There's, I don't think there's any argument on that at all.
Hmm.
I, in my opinion, that matters absolutely zero. I hate that you can just, you know, it's unlimited. The amount of times that you can move. That's the only thing I would like to see is see it maybe limited to two. But I think of and I spoke to Danny Zuchak this morning, and when we were recording, and I talked to him about like Deshaun Good is maybe the perfect example of somebody that should have unlimited times that they can transfer, because look at, I mean, his story to me is amazing, is absolutely amazing. And he, everybody in his corner should be an advocate for being able to transfer as many times as you want, because he's such an example of a kid that has taken advantage of every single place he's been, and it all started with Fork Union, and he just climbed and climbed and climbed.
Hmm.
So, at the same, as much as I'd like to see it limited, not maybe to one, but you know, two or three, I guess, which three is usually what people have, but we've seen more than that, more than that as well. But I would hate to see a kid like Deshaun Good be limited in any way, because it's been such a he's what kids should strive to be. And I'm not saying transfer four times or three times or whatever, but what I'm saying is absolutely kill it at every place you're at, and it will pay the dividend. That those dividends will be paid. Unequivocally, you will.
Yeah.
And that's what kids should strive to be doing. What he is doing right now. Now I understand he's 6'8" and he has maybe definitely has pro athletic ability, maybe even NBA athletic ability, but like he should be an example. And so all I'm saying is I would hate to see something like that be limited at all.
Yeah, I mean, personally, and this goes way beyond my pay grade or anything, but like, there's a lot of things that are said out there, but a lot of these lawyers that I follow, or these sports agents that know the laws and have a good handle on it. I mean, a lot of the stuff that is implemented by, if it's the NCAA and now Trump signing executive orders or whatever the hell that is, I don't know how you get it to stick.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if there is an answer for it. It was interesting. I can't remember what he said, but Dusty May said something. Maybe it was yesterday. That was a very valid point on the transfer portal, and um, I wish I remembered it to say it on this podcast, but it was a very good way to look at things on how he looks at it. Um, it was something that's, I want to say it was something with like how coaches, move around, and um, there was something else about like, God, I wish I'm just drawing a blank here, but it, and then I think Jay Billis said something too that was very interesting that I saw got a lot of action. Um, where right now, like some of the universities and stuff that are tapping into these coaches that have contracts and things like that. They're doing something somewhat illegally if they wanted to contact like tampering, essentially.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean it's a wild time, no question. You know, one of my best friends is Jace Hurl at West Virginia, and he was telling me, they just played in the Crown tournament, and the portal opens in a couple days, so like they're scrambling to get ready for that, and so it's just a different time, man. But I don't I'm with you. I don't think the kids or players should be limited at all. You know, Coaches seem to always want to try to find the best next spot too, and there's no guarantee of how long they'll be there or when they're going to get fired, and you know so I feel like the kids should be able to transfer freely in some aspects, but like you said, when they're somewhere, 5, 6 times, it's a little
Yeah.
interesting. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I don't necessarily blame them. It's like me being in corporate. Like I'm not necessarily loyal to a corporate company because at the
Right.
end of the day, they could get rid of me tomorrow. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, that's kind
Yeah.
of how I look at it. Is go where your best fit is at that. Especially when you're younger.
Right.
Um, and if these kids can put 100 to 500,000 in their pocket by the time they're 23 and graduated, great. I wish I could have done that.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, that's. I I think there's. I mean, I do think there's. And we talked earlier today about. The money is going to be a problem. I think here within the next 5 years. I mean, we're starting to hear some murmurs, around Kansas, and Coach Sampson mentioned, that basically Houston's broke, which you know that it, and I know they're not broke, but I think what he
Hmm.
means is their budget is at absolutely zero right now, because they've spent everything they were allotted, and there's nothing. And I think that's where probably the situation at Kansas and why they're not giving money, putting money back into the university as they used to because they made so much. But I, I think that's a really dangerous area, a really slippery slope for these universities to be on that, you know, walk that line every year to year. And, you know, I do think eventually a lot of because this is relatively new, I do think a lot of the donors start to pull back because everybody was fired up,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't be any different. I'm sure you wouldn't either. Your home university, who your favorite school, WVU or whoever it is that that we all love, respectively. Like, if we had $1 trillion, well, yeah, I'm going to pump some money over there and help get the best quarterback I can get, or get the best, wing I can get on the basketball team, or whatever. Like, you got that power, you want to be part of it, like everybody. But at some point, you know, there's a lot of, most of the people out there are looking and they're like, well, I didn't really get the best return for my money there. After 5 years, we haven't even made it to the Final Four. We haven't, we had a couple years that we were barely 500. What am I doing wrong? This isn't worth it anymore. I do think it's going to dial back. In my opinion, you know, number one, most of this isn't NIL. It's collectives.
Yeah.
It's the loophole in the rule. And number two, and I don't have any problem with that. As a matter of fact, I would encourage that universities do that. I just think they need to cap it and say everybody gets $100,000 and we're done with it,
Hmm.
and just be done with it. And so you can reasonably pay every athlete without it. And then if AJ DeBonsa rolls into town and he can sign a $20 million with $20 million deal with Jumpman, then hey, let him. What's the difference in that and the guy going down the street to, to bartend on the weekends for extra money if he's a basketball player? Like there's no difference.
Right.
One is in a different tax bracket than the other, but in the end, like you're a job. It's just a job, and there shouldn't be any restriction on guys doing that, doing the true NIL. No restriction at all. I've always thought that. Always thought that was a silly rule that kids couldn't make money, but obviously there's enough money that everybody can pay their guys. I think it's really funny too that these kids, like some of these, I just think it's weird that we're bringing these kids in, giving them whatever $2 million, and they're not bound to anything. There's
No.
no real contract. There's no. I'm like, who come up with that idea? Like to just hand a 19-year-old kid a $2 million check and say, just do what you want. But we're hoping you stay here and just play basketball. It's like kind of like the Darren Peterson thing. A lot of people criticized him, and I'm like, well, yeah, he's probably load managing because he's going to go to the NBA and he's probably going to play like, God knows how many minutes a night, on a terrible team for the next 3 or 4 years. So I can't blame the kid.
No.
It is what it is. But what do you think
Yeah.
about some of that?
Well, I was listening to Doug Gottlieb the other day about his situation over there at, I think, Green Bay, and he was saying the same thing. Like, it's hard for, I think, some of these, like, schools, maybe every school, honestly, to keep going to boosters and asking them for money every single year when your roster is completely different. It's like, I think he was saying something about, the kid, like the fans start liking a kid. He just got there, by the end of the year, and then the kid's gone. And it's like they gave you, 20, 50, whatever it is, thousand. And then now you're going to have to go back when you don't even know who's going to be on your roster again, you know, um, and have to go back and get somebody to donate to a team that just got dismantled by the portal. And like I think you said it earlier, like the return on the investment thing. That's where I think like some of these GMs and you know people that are handling the money in athletic departments or whatever, or maybe what I've heard is they're trying to find ways to make return on investments for these people that have businesses and things like that. So I'll be interested to see how that kind of forms here in the next couple years, because
Yeah.
if somebody's writing you a check for $1 million for a kid, it's like, what do they really get out of it, right? There's not much. Maybe some nice seats or something of that aspect. But I'm wondering if they'll start doing advertising and different things to help those companies maybe get a return at some point. So you know I think you make a valid point. Like, I think it will die down. I think it's really hard. I don't think it'll be hard for places like, Indiana or Kansas or, somebody that has a huge basketball following and deep pockets, right? I think it's where it gets tough for the schools that are some of the mid majors that don't have that big history. They don't have a lot of donors. They just have like a select pool in a small town that it's going to be tough for them to keep getting that money each year in and out, if your roster keeps changing and things like that. So I think that was what Doug Gottlieb was saying. I thought it was a very valid point, because I've even said it to a couple college coaches that I know, like, how in the hell are you going to keep up with a $10.5 million
Yeah.
you know budget
Yeah.
unless you have some multi-millionaire billionaire guys that
Yeah.
money isn't really a thing. So yeah, that's kind of my thought on it. I don't
Yeah,
know
I
how
just
it
don't
would be
think it's.
sustainable.
I mean, I mean, I almost know it's not sustainable. I
No,
mean,
and
anybody with any kind of business acumen can look at that and say, this isn't going to last forever, you know?
yeah, I mean, and then you brought the point on, like, with this money stuff and stuff maybe potentially being regulated. I mean, personally, I think the first thing that needs to be regulated is the agent side. I mean, I don't really deal with them that much, but Brandon kind of does some consulting with Weave, and is involved with a pretty good agency over there. But it's insane, like some of the kids out there, like that can consider their person an agent. I mean, it's more of like a bad handler, in some aspects, that has no business really telling a kid how to manage money. That there's just there's a lot of bad people out there, man, in that
Let me
agency
ask you,
scene.
is there, I mean, is there a, is there any kind of regulation on that at all? Does the NC, does anybody have to be registered, or how does that? Or is it just like call
Um,
yourself an NIL agent and roll with it?
Pretty much, I think that's what it is. Now, it could be
Wow.
wrong. They may have to take some little, you know, test or something, that I don't think so, but I could be wrong. But from my understanding, there isn't. It's just completely wide open. And some of the guys I've dealt with, in the space, that consider themselves agents, I'm just like, how in the hell are you an agent? Like, I don't really understand it, because it's not like pro sports, right? Like, where I think they have to take some pretty significant tests and be regulated. You have to have some
Yeah.
contract law and some other things that are pretty significant. Like here, man, like you'll have, young kids, being an agent at 20 years old, and they're managing a $5 million player.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my head around that. Because one, I don't think they have any financial, acumen or background to even figure out how to tell the kid how to, do well with the money, or do the right things with that money. Because that's where I think that is going to be an issue here soon. Is a lot of these kids that are getting this money. I hope to God that they have somebody that knows what they're doing for the tax purposes. And
At least
you know,
hire a lawyer
I'm
to
hoping to
read the.
God, because you're going to see some kids that are 23, 24 years old being in a lot of trouble, with the IRS potentially,
It's
and things
coming.
like that. So
It's coming.
I think that's where the first, in my personal opinion, now I could be wrong, some people might disagree, but I think that's the one thing that needs to be cleaned up, like ASAP, because you have a lot of people out there that are just kind of mooching off these kids, and it's not done right, for the kid whatsoever.
Yeah.
And who else knows who else, is in that corner as well, trying to get involved. And that agency side thing can be a dirty place, man. It's very interesting. Um, there
Yeah.
are
I
good,
saw, I saw a parent on Twitter the other day comment that AAU was just, vultures and money grab and all this, and I'm thinking, dude, if you only knew what else is out there, I'm like,
yeah,
it's much more slimier than that. It is.
yeah,
You're just seeing what's above the water. You're not seeing the rest of the iceberg there.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's. I wondered. I always wondered about that. I knew you would probably know, the details of.
I know a lot more. I don't know if I feel comfortable sharing it on this podcast. But
We'll
there's
talk
a
about
lot
that in
of,
person someday.
yeah, there's a lot of crazy things that go on under the scenes that, I don't know if they're legal or not.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
doubt it, but it's very interesting to kind of
It's
be
it's
involved and
just
hear all
it's
the
just
stuff.
really it's just really weird that people would that there would be you got parents and a kid who's an adult, and they would let somebody that doesn't have any, at least a legal background, or at least a CPA or something that could give
Right.
them good advice on one part of that or the other, and because that's real money. It's crazy money, and I can't imagine handling that amount of money and just saying, well, I'll just get my Uncle Bill to do. I've seen him, wheel and deal for cars. He'll be able to talk to that, university president out of another 75 grand a year, or whatever. I mean, like, but
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
just
like,
me.
yeah, it's just interesting because like the NBA and the NFL or NHL, whatever it is, like they have, when they're 19, 20 years old and they, go into this professional place, they got a bunch of people that help with the money management and things of that nature. And I don't necessarily know if there's anything really like that for some of these kids that are making even somewhat more, um, at the college side. So like that's where I think it needs to be addressed quickly because the last thing I'd want to see a kid do is have to file, or get in trouble with the IRS at 23
Right.
years old. It's not something that
But
you
it's
want
going
to
to
mess
happen.
with.
It's going to happen.
Yes.
And it'll probably be several. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope not, but um, it could be really a landslide of problems for,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the guy that's making $3-4 million a year. It could be the kid that's
Yeah.
getting 20 grand a year. He
Hmm.
can be in they'll put you in jail for tax fraud for making 20,000 just as easy as they will making 20 million. You go to the same jail, and you
Yeah.
get the same size cell as everybody else. I mean, it's not just the high profile guys that we're talking about here.
Hmm.
It's everyone, and
Right.
it's a legit concern. I never thought about that, but you're exactly right, Jeff.
Hmm.
Back to the transfers. What do you think about? I've been itching to ask somebody about this. What's the chances? And I don't know how close you are to the WVU. Obviously, you got some you got some ties there. So I'm going to put you on the spot, and two kids. One's pretty obvious. Sharon Young in the portal. Blake Barkley in the portal. SoCon. I don't know if he was a player of the year or whatever, but
He was good.
I think he was the
Yeah.
tournament MVP.
Yeah. He was at
But both,
Tennessee
I think
State.
it's so interesting. Both Morgantown natives in the portal, and I don't have any doubt that both of them can be. I'm not saying starters. I'm not saying all conference guys, but both of them are good enough to play at WVU tomorrow.
It's interesting because like you look at the team this year. You know, like Hodge and them got the job somewhat late, right? So like they kind of
Right.
had to make some moves, and they really, in my personal opinion, they did extremely well with what they had. They did have good players, but I think even Ross Hodge even said it like he got a very good idea of what caliber type of player they need to have to maybe
Yeah.
try to be in the top three of the Big 12.
Right.
So it's you probably have to probably have to ask Jace, but I definitely know that those kids are probably on their radar. Um, but as far they definitely want to try to get the best available with
Oh,
what they
absolutely.
have now. Could I see them maybe signing them as like some role guys potentially or something? Yes. But I think right now with Miles Sadler coming in and a couple other guys that they signed, they need to go find like the best available right now.
Yeah.
Um, to help build on that. And they got Amir Jenkins and a couple other guys like Belo or Brandon Lorient that they can build around. And I think they need to go find some studs. And I
Yeah,
don't necessarily know if those kids are the type that they would go after right away.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I
that's
guess it
just my personal opinion.
depends
So
partly on who leaves, huh?
correct, correct. And I don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen anybody announce that they're going in the portal except for maybe one kid. Um, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see since they just got done with the crown. That could change in the next
Yeah,
24 hours. but
yeah, yeah. Well,
um,
I'm
but yeah, I
I'm
mean,
hoping.
I do like the kid from East Tennessee State, Barkley. He's a good player.
Yeah,
Um, I think he definitely could do some damage. But again, I think they're just waiting to see who hits that thing and try to go and get the best available that's out there first, and then they'll start filling in the gaps. Is kind of what I think will happen, but could be completely wrong. But at least that's what I would do. But
I'm
there's a reason I'm not a Division I head coach or a Division I assistant. So
yeah, me either. But I like to give them all advice, as I see fit.
yeah,
And I'd love to see both of those guys there, and to say I'd be disappointed if one or both of them wasn't. If neither one end up there, I'll be a little disappointed. I ain't gonna lie.
yeah. No,
But
I think Barkley definitely. I remember, you know, I remember his name getting brought up to me by somebody on their staff at some point. If I knew somebody or if I, knew his coach or something, right when he announced that he was going into the portal. But, we'll see. It'll be
yeah,
interesting to see who they bring in. So,
yeah, and everybody knows who Sharon is. I think a lot of people don't know who Blake Barkley is because he kind of left here before he ever really got.
yeah.
I think he left here after his sophomore year and played it. And I can't remember the school, what exactly the name. I know it had Scott in the title. It was in
Was
Pennsylvania,
it the Scotland campus?
Scotland campus, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And played there his junior year, and then he plays his senior year, Putnam Science, and they were ranked number one in the country the
Hmm.
year he was there. So a lot of people just didn't get a chance to know exactly who he was, but I remember I watched as much of his stuff as I could, up until really up until this year, and then caught back up with him when their conference tournament started, and he just killed it. So he looks like a power conference player. I mean, when you watch his highlights and you see the size and all, like I don't know. We'll see. I'd have a hard time passing on him, but again, I don't have anything, no skin in the game at all as far as that goes. Let's see what else. I have to go back to my try to stick to the outline here that we talked about.
Oh, you're good.
Make sure we covered everything. So we talked about jamborees, portal, and do you think these changes from the White House? Do you think that's going to stick? Is that like where do we stand with? I don't really I don't really get where we stand with all of that. If that's like set in stone, or if
I
the
don't.
NCAA will come back and say, "Listen, pal, stay in your lane. We don't need." I hate to think. Here's what I told somebody earlier today. I hate to think that the voice of reason is coming from Washington D.C. I would like to think that basketball itself can kind of solve this problem in house. Don't you agree?
I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, I think like Brandon said some stuff about it. I bet there's people that have already filed lawsuits or injunction or whatever it is to get around it. I mean, again, there's not much you can do. Um, it's like, do you follow? Which one do you follow? Right? Like there really isn't one. Um, And I'm diving in a little bit more to kind of understand that, to where I can maybe talk about it a little bit more in depth because it's just so recent and new. And I think there's a lawyer. I can't remember if he's an agent or not. His name's Darren Heitner, but he's on Twitter about it, and he has a law background and understands a lot of things, and some of the stuff he says is really intelligent when it comes to this stuff. So I've been reading along with what he's been saying, but from my gathering, there's not much that can really be done. Um, from this. I mean, I don't understand why Washington D.C. is even getting involved. I
Right.
don't know if the NCAA is, they. I hate to say this, but I think they did have lost complete control. This could have been solved, from what I understand, 10 to 15 years ago if they would have taken the time to do it. But you know, it's just like them saying, "Oh, we're going to expand the tournament." They don't really talk to anybody else but amongst themselves. They don't reach out to coaches. I think even coaches even came out and said it like, "Why are you guys making decisions in this when you've never even talked to any of us and asked us how we feel or what the best solution would be?" I mean, I feel like there's some pretty big names that you could get around in a table and could come up with a pretty good plan. But from what I've understood, man, and I'm probably gonna get in trouble for saying this, but like, working with the NCAA is very difficult. I see it with our jamborees, I see it with our events, I see it with the circuits. It's just they're just not the best group to like come up with a solution or a plan that makes sense. It's one way, or it's our way or the highway type mentality, and I think people are kind of tired of it, to be quite honest with you. Um, and I think that's where you see a lot of these people, filing injunctions and going up against them. And whenever they do make a decision, it seems like there's 50 to 100 players that sue them because they know that they're going to win, because there's nothing they can stand on. So I hope to God at least at some point the NCAA will just take down their wall and open it up to some of these guys, like Tom Izzo or whoever it is, to get these guys in a room and just figure out the best solution moving forward. Because again, like you said, it's not a sustainable model. I mean, what was it? Rutgers, is that the one that's like 500 million or something in the hole?
Yeah.
Like, it's just crazy things like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, to be honest with you, because I don't know that much about it yet. But
Yeah.
from my gatherings, that's kind of how it seems to be being played out. Is the NCAA or whoever will say something, and then then everything just ends up in the courts
Yeah.
and is decided that way. And 90% of the time, it goes in favor of the player or whoever else it is. So,
Right. Yeah.
and I doubt it's sustainable for the NCAA. I can't imagine how much their bills are with lawsuits. I mean, I
Right.
don't.
And the amount of extra personnel they probably have to have. And not only that, it's been taxing on the athletic departments with hiring so many more people.
Mhm.
I mean, and most of them can't afford it. They can't afford to have multiple compliance people and financial people, and it's just
Yeah, it's weird, man. Like, you say the compliance thing, with the Pittsburgh Jamboree, like we had, we have connections to compliance officers all over, and uh, there was one conference that sent out an email saying that none of their coaches could come to our event. And we were like, "Why not?" They're like, "Because you guys aren't in compliance with what this says." And I'm like, "Okay, well, we sent it over to the freaking whatever, Big 12 or whoever, they said we're fine. So like, where is the disconnect between your conference office and ours, or in theirs? We couldn't figure it out. So it was very bizarre. So I think it's just a big cluster. Excuse my language, clusterfuck.
Yeah,
In my personal opinion.
it's truth. I mean,
Um,
yeah, it's the truth, and and it doesn't seem like they're doing anything to help themselves.
no,
To clean it up. It's just let it, and maybe this is their, maybe they are hoping waiting for it to really fail and implode before they get and they can say, well, we told you so. You wanted this. This is the way. You got what you wanted. And you got exactly what you asked for, and here you go.
hmm
My biggest concern, as just a fan and somebody who's just, I've been such a big college basketball fan, since the '90s. I'm just afraid people will lose interest. It just seems like there's just certain sports that the people in charge, including the people at the top of the participants and the teams that participate and the people that run the league or the organizations or whatever, they just do their best to to alienate everybody and drive people away, and then when it's all said and done, they're just like, oh, what happened? And they're so out of touch with what's actually going on. And I, I'm
yeah,
I have a fear that college sports are going to go that way because the two big ones, football, basketball, because it's so easy to get disengaged when you don't feel like you have a connection there. Like you mentioned earlier about kids just in one year out the next, and fans kind of get man, we've lost that. We have lost
hmm
that where people just fall in love with. I mean, could you imagine if Deshaun Butler came here one year and just left the next? I mean, he could walk into West Virginia. He could run for governor tomorrow on a day's notice and probably win. Like there's just guys like that just captivated a whole state. They were great people. They treated fans right. They just did everything right, and that story never gets written if they're, I don't know. But that goes again. I'm not against people leaving and moving, whatever. But
No, I mean the thing I say though is like you do love like when you have that like that following, that loyalty and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I go down to the Missouri Valley Conference tournament every year in St. Louis for Arch Madness, and phenomenal tournament, always has been. I
yes,
was going when Jace was down there at Missouri State with Dana Ford, and just the history and everything with that conference, and you know all the great players that have came through Missouri Valley Conference, and all the history. Like I said, I mean, just like I think that's where this it kind of depletes that in some aspects.
yeah,
Because like it's such a great environment, and all these teams. I think Indiana State, I think the other day just said that every single player is off their roster already. You know, and it sucks for those guys. I think the mid majors, even the low major plus and all those guys, they just get demolished in this thing as far as
yeah,
having to build. And I think that's another thing that goes into the JUCO stuff. I mean, you're starting to see a lot of these guys that were junior college coaches that are starting to get these profile head jobs, and they seem to adapt well with it because they're
because
used
they're
to
used to it. Yeah,
that. Right.
yeah.
I think I've seen a lot of people talking about that, but it's basically just a high level JUCO kind of turnover every year.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
it's
and
you know um, you know trying to do things in in such a short window.
Hmm.
short notice and quick turnaround, and that's what
Hmm.
JUCO guys are
Yeah,
yeah, that's what they do. That's how
yeah,
they do it. So
yeah. And
uh,
they've done it at a level too where their resources were very limited. I mean, shit,
yep,
most of the JUCO coaches in this, maybe not super high level ones, but a lot of them, when I did it, shit, we were doing laundry. I mean, every single thing you could imagine.
yeah, five
With
hundred
two
dollar a year
guys,
recruiting budget.
with two guys on staff, with these Division Ones and stuff, shit, some of them have what, fucking 20 assistants. Uh, you which I get. You got to find that edge.
Sure.
But you know, they already know how to do it at that, and then you give them the resources to do it as well. I mean, it makes you a pretty powerful person. If you came from from that area of the
Good
game.
deal.
So
Yeah. Yeah, that's it is the JUCO coaches have such an advantage in that in that realm. They'd be a good guy to those would be good guys
mhm.
to bring on staff at
Yeah.
some point and just kind of get everybody's heads wrapped around how you have to approach that. How
Hmm.
far out you got to start really evaluating guys and yeah,
Yeah, and
there's a science behind that, I think.
I think it goes into too who you're hiring on your staff as well, right? Like, some guys that either started young in this crazy transfer portal era that understand
Right.
it, and then maybe even some, JUCO guys that have been through it before, and I think that's a key part when you're looking at your staffs and stuff like that too
Yeah.
to help you with it. Especially if you're a guy that, is has been in the game for a long time. This is a whole different. It's like AI, man. Like everybody is trying to adjust and figure out what the hell to do with
Yeah.
this shit. So
Yeah.
it's. I think it's kind of the same thing. You're trying to adapt to it and find still try to find that edge to make you a
Right.
competitive team. So
I just hire 5 AI assistant coaches,
there you
to do
go.
your scouting, to do your, they can't do laundry, but they could do all your administrative work. Like there's some value. Any of you coaches need advice on that, reach out and let me know. I'll do some consulting for you on that. But Coach, if there's anything else you want to cover, this is the time to do it. Let's go through your events that you've got coming up and talk about that before we hop off here.
Yeah, so we got some of the spring and summer stuff coming up here. I believe the first one is the unsigned sophomore event, which runs encounter with the Puma Live Circuit, or the Next Pro 16 or whatever they
Hmm.
call it, and it'll be in Tulsa. I believe it's May 15th, the weekend of May 15th through the 17th. Where they'll have a bunch of unsigned sophomores coming in and playing. I think last year we had 48 out of the 60 we had in it sign at Division II level. So it was really good. And there's a couple of those kids that were in that event that were some of the best D2 players in the country and are about
I'll
to
bet.
get paid
Yeah.
at the Division 1 level. Then we have the J48 in July. Um, I believe it's the first. I think it's the 10th through the 11th in Richmond, Virginia. Really high level event. I mean, we'll have probably 300 coaches watching that thing. It's a great environment. And then we'll do the J Champions that weekend after, which is like the top 20 from the J48 that go and play in a couple games. So, and then we have obviously the fall events. We're starting to kind of line those out right now. We should have probably those released here in the next couple weeks. But I think we're going to do Oklahoma City, Atlanta again, Denver, and then a couple maybe new ones. I think we might still do the Pittsburgh one again for the prep and post grad stuff. So yeah, I mean it's about to get super busy here in the next
That's
couple
good.
months. So But
That's
yeah,
good. I love it. I love it. And I I really appreciate those events being out there. I is one thing when I talk to college coaches, I ask them, are you are you involved with this? As far as do you know what's going on here and what's available, and some do, some don't, but it is something I think is I know the portal is taken away from it some, but I can see I can see it coming back as well because I don't think we probably haven't realized how much the D2 level needs JUCO. I think maybe
correct.
there's still a resurgence to come there. And that may be the kind of the ultimate feeder, stop off there for most of those guys. But I will say this: what an eye-opening experience was for to walk into the gym there in Bridgeport and to that event, and it was so weird. I mean, I've been in there 100 times for AAU events, and it was just the vibe. I can't even describe it to people. Like, I try to tell them like it's in my exact words to a lot of people was it's like an AAU event without all the bullshit. And there's not, the parents aren't sitting on the sideline screaming, the coaches aren't they might be yelling, but they're not, it's just the everybody, it's real basketball. It's real basketball. If you want to see college basketball and a bunch of it, like it's real basketball. Those junior colleges were, I mean, those guys are so well coached. They're so, it was an eye-opening experience, and I've encouraged a lot of kids to go. Told them, hey, if they have this again, I don't even know if they're allowed to come in and watch, but I told them, I said, if you're allowed to go in and watch, and you can get into that place, just go watch and see what this is, and get an idea of what level these guys are and what they look like. Even just a year or two, most of these kids, they're muscled up. They are just animals, on the floor, and it
Yeah,
was just it was
what's
so
crazy
I loved
about
it,
like
honestly.
what's
I
different.
loved it, and
Yeah,
I'd go every year if I could, whether I'm bringing a team or whether I'm just a fan or whatever. But
yeah, no, and like I said, I mean, what's crazy is like the junior college basketball kind of out east too is still kind of a developing kind of deal. I mean, you got some pretty good JUCOs out here. A lot of small like Division 2, Division 3 JUCOs. But then when you go out west and you get into like Texas and Kansas, and
right, yeah,
there's so many more JUCOs out that way. Um, with I mean, just like I said, if you can ever come to the Oklahoma City or Atlanta event, man, it's pretty unreal. I mean, you'll have at least 15 7-footers walking around. You got high profile kids. It's pretty insane. The Appalachian one was pretty good. I mean, I think we had Delta in there who had a really
hmm
good year. I think Huntington Prep came, who
they
had
did,
one of
yeah,
the top 100 kids.
yeah,
And some other really good JUCOs in that thing. But it's just kind of crazy to look at. And the other events too, I think we had like maybe 20 to 25 teams in Bridgeport.
that sounds right, yeah,
In Atlanta and OKC, it's like 55 to 65
right, yeah,
teams. So it's insane. I think, we held the Atlanta one at Lake Point, which is this massive facility, and it was packed all day. I mean, from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. at night. I mean,
wow.
it every single court was going. Same with OKC. I mean, it's just nonstop. So yeah, it's really fun to be a part of, and like I said, just the high level of play and the coaching and all that stuff. It's just
Right.
fun to watch. Now I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off most of the day, so it's hard for me to catch and watch. But when I do, it's pretty insane. You know, you got 300 coaches at each of those events, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
it's
they're real recruiting events. Like I mean, talk about exposure. This is
yeah,
the, and I quoted, I said the other day, like, JUCO, is the exposure platform. Like
yeah,
that's just what it is right now. That's where it's at. That's what it is. I've had more than one college coach tell me they wouldn't care if they ever went to another AAU event. They would go to JUCO jamborees and that's it, and recruit the portal and get whatever fell in their lap from high school. And you can't really blame them. You can go to an event like that, even the one, in Bridgeport, and be so much more efficient, with how evaluating guys and finding guys that fit your system. It's just I can see that. I mean, just where it's so much easier.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, to the college coaches, you know, the benefit for them is like, we live in a world of we want quick returns on our wins and losses in this thing. I think somebody put out a statistic the other day. I think a head coach has like a 4.6 year lifespan at one job.
Yeah,
I don't think if this was 20 years ago, like I firmly believe that some of those guys that were at, schools for years, if they were in this landscape, that would have not been the case. I
right.
mean,
Yeah,
shit. I mean, look at North Carolina. I mean, they just fired. He had a 70 something percent winning percentage, and that's not good enough to keep your job. I mean, fuck me. I don't know what else is.
yeah, exactly.
But it's it's one of those things. Like they want bigger, faster, stronger, man. And if that helps you keep your job longer, you kind of have to do it. Um,
Yeah,
it's unfortunate for the high school kids, in some aspects, but with that also being said, they do have other options to get bigger, faster, stronger. And,
for sure.
if it's going to a post grad or a prep school and then into a JUCO and then going into a 4 year,
Yeah,
great. Or if it's maybe going Division 2, performing at Division 2. I mean, how many kids from Division 2 hit the portal the other day? Was it like 700 and something? I think we're
yeah.
over 1,000
And the
now.
and the rate of those guys going, to division. I think I mentioned this earlier. Going to Division 1 is probably higher than ever.
Yes.
Not that everybody's going to get that opportunity, but
No,
um,
but
you know,
you still
not.
have options, and
Oh yeah, lots of options for sure.
it's not just I hear a lot of times like, kids aren't getting recruited at the high school level. I kind of disagree. I think they're not getting like the mid majors and things like that anymore like they used to. But I
Right.
think there's a lot of schools out there that are still recruiting them, especially at the 4 year lower level stuff,
Yeah.
NAIA, D2, even Division 3, and JUCO. So,
Right.
but yeah,
Well, Coach, we've been
cool.
a little over an hour. I've got
Yeah,
another meeting to get to here in
you're good.
15 minutes. This has been great. Everything you've talked about has been absolutely fantastic. Lots of good knowledge, lots of good wisdom to pass along, lots of good insight about a lot of different things that I appreciate, that I wondered about myself, and hopefully everybody else was just as curious. I really appreciate you taking the time. I
Oh,
know you're a
thanks.
busy guy. Uh, Best wishes on
You
April
too.
18th. That's going to be an awesome day for you,
Yeah.
and yeah, just best wishes going forward. And obviously, if you need anything, don't be afraid to reach out. So,
Same here. I appreciate it. So
and
yeah, thanks
would
for
love to
having
have
me
you
on.
on again. At a good time, sometime. Later on in the year, and maybe talk
Sure.
about your upcoming. Some of your jamborees in the fall, and hype those up a little bit.
No, that sounds great.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Awesome, man. We'll be in touch. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.